Yeah, I am too. I don't think he's really saying that. Shiny, yeah. Oh my God. You look exactly the same.
I think it's rain. It looked like but she said, but I did. You probably have
Don't want to do that one.
There was a it was so we playing down. Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. They all. Nobody else.
Yes.
Just
Yeah, 1990. I think that was, I was
oh. It was
I understand. I understand.
yes. First time I
maybe come on play. I mean, I didn't realize.
Yeah. So yeah, of course this lives. And I think
Like eventually get us to this point.
that is so. I mean, I don't know. Oh,
Yeah, I'm excited.
Subject one.
I met him earlier today. So just texted me. Yeah.
Those bites. I wanted to make it less expensive. She was on right before this. Didn't. Oh, but she did.
Yeah, I wouldn't want the cat.
Yes, yeah, only one set of foot there. You can't let her run. Good walking it. We're doing all the and then
We're already.
yes, that's right.
What's the shape?
Down the stairs.
Okay, we had a couple little technical kind of glitches, but we're ready to begin now. Everyone assume the appropriate position for beginning a most auspicious occasion. Okay, best behavior, everyone, especially you. Best behavior. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the opening ceremony of the 42nd Annual Conference of West Indian Literature. Yay! So, before we get further into the meat of the program, we are going to be good people and listen to the safety briefing. So let's pay attention to the safety briefing. You never know in case of anything.
The University of the West Indies places extreme importance on the maintenance of your health and safety. Please give me your attention for a few moments as I outline the emergency procedures to be followed at today's event. This building is equipped with a fire alarm system, and in the event of an emergency, the alarm will sound. Please note that we have no planned drills for today, so if the alarm sounds, we will treat it as an indication of a real emergency. Once the alarm has sounded, calmly make your way through one of the exits. This auditorium has 4 exits directly to the back, and 2 emergency exits at the front of the auditorium to the left and right. Once outside the building, make your way to the assembly area, which is to the north of the building. Stay at the assembly area where you will receive further directions from university personnel. In the event of an earthquake, stay calm. There are no tables under which we can cover and hold, but you must beware of falling debris. Once the shaking stops, exit the building in a calm and orderly manner and assemble at the assembly area where you will receive further instructions from a university personnel. Thank you.
Okay, so now that we've covered that, let's begin with our salutations. So we want to give special welcome and recognition to our Dean Professor Elizabeth Wolcott Hackshaw, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, Dr. Suzanne Berg, who is the head of Department for the Literary, Cultural and Communication Studies. We also want to welcome our conference coordinator, Dr. Geraldine Skeet, and our speaker, Professor Rosamond S. King, who is with us, and we look forward to her presentation later. This evening's honoree, Dr. MERLE HODGE, Mr. Garvin Madera, CEO, Caribbean Airlines, Ms. Christine Randall, Director, UE Press, and of course, the UE, St. Augustine staff, students, and well-wishers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. Welcome. I invite you now to join with the choir in listening to or singing along or humming or learning the national anthem of Trinidad and Tobago. Stand at attention all.
Forged from the love of liberty in the fires of hope and prayer, with boundless faith in our destiny, we solemnly declare. Side by side we stand, islands of the blue Caribbean Sea, this our native land. We pledge our lives to thee. Here every creed and race find an equal place, and may God bless our nation. Here every creed and race find an equal place, and may God bless our nation.
You may be seated. I noticed a little hesitation there in taking your seat, and I understand that was a very intimidating rendition of the national anthem. You did some notes there. I understand the hesitation. At this point, we want to welcome Dr. Suzanne Berg. Yes? To give the welcome.
Thank you so much, Karen. Dean, Faculty of Humanities and Education, Professor Elizabeth Wolcott Hackshaw, fellow heads of department, conference conveners, Drs. Geraldine Skeet and Karen Sanderson-Cole, keynote speaker, Professor Rosamond King, honorary mentor, Dr. MERLE HODGE, specially invited guests, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to welcome you to the 42nd installation of the West Indian Literature Conference held here at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. This year's theme, Making Us Better Than We Think We Could Be, Alternative Identities and Technologies, is a clarion call for the ages. inviting us, as renowned author Ta-Nehisi Coates in a recent interview said, to explore the transformative potential of literature to shape the world around us entirely. The philosopher Nietzsche asserted that we have art in order not to die of the truth. In some translations, it says not to die of reality. Indeed, literature provides a necessary respite from the cruelties and tensions of everyday life and allows us to consistently apprehend ourselves in more profound ways. Indeed, stories represent one of society's most foolproof safety valves, and for Caribbean people, literature's role has been particularly significant, keeping our societies collectively and us individually from coming apart at the seams. For us in the Caribbean, stories and literature are not only forms of entertainment or escapism, but are powerful portals for us to claim and reclaim time and space. Over the next few days, we will honor the legacy of Professor Eddie Bow, whose piece, It Was the Singing, inspired our team. The twin concepts of deliverance and grace that are explored in the piece are central to our survival as Caribbean people and will undoubtedly influence our capacity to thrive in the uncertain times ahead. Similarly, the corpus of tonight's honoree, Dr. MERLE HODGE, echoes the theme of making us better by the ways it has consistently amplified the unique voices of those who are easily silenced in our society, such as women and children. Colleagues, we face futures that continue to threaten the very existence of the small island states of the Caribbean, due, of course, to the multiple challenges of climate change, the agglomeration of global wealth, and the disavowal of peace and security as the main operating principles of our international and, I dare say, regional governing bodies. Meanwhile, the convergence of ICTs and its impact on education, the arts, science, and culture offer opportunities for us to question established norms and present alternative viewpoints. But in the midst of all of this doubt, literature offers us possibilities to confront difficult truths about ourselves, and it also helps us to negotiate a new treaty of sensibilities. And I'm borrowing a phrase from Wilson Harris, one that brings together the creative imagination, the spatial potential of Caribbean, I'm using a phrase by Yao Ramasa, the unique means we have in the Caribbean of social production and reproduction, with the inherent intelligence of our folkways. So it is my hope that this meeting fosters really, truly generative, honest, and open dialogue. I encourage everyone to participate actively, share your insights, and use the social activities to network. There are, of course, a myriad of ways to contribute, inclusive, of course, paper presentations, workshops, plenary sessions, and artisans market just across the street, and the good old quintessential Trinidadian line with lots of talk, food, and music, and laughter, of course. So I want to thank you for being here and for your commitment to advancing West Indian literature and scholarship. I look forward to stimulating discussions, innovative ideas, and the engagement of our better angels, because as Bao himself surmised, we are all people together. Thank you very much. Enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brigg, as she has reminded us of the power of stories and the power of stories to bring us here from so many different parts of the world. Join me now in welcoming the Dean, Professor Elizabeth Walcott-Hackshaw, as she brings her greetings. will be followed by an introduction of the honor.
Salutations. Did you take the salutation? Salutations. Thank you. I couldn't memorize the salutation. Sorry. So Dr. Susan Burke, Head of Department, Literary, Cultural, and Communication Studies, Dr. Geraldine Skeet and Dr. Karen Sanderson School, Conference Coordinators, Professor Rosamond King, from Chair of Brooklyn College, Pune, Dr. MERLE HODGE, this evening's honoree, Mr. Garvin Madeira, Ms. Christine Randall, Director of UE Press, the UWI St. Augustine staff and students, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I join in welcoming you all to our St. Augustine campus and the 42nd Annual Conference on West Indian Literature. The Faculty of Humanities and Education is once again pleased as host to continue to foster a tradition of dynamic, creative, intellectual exchanges that started with the first conference in 1981. The conference's schedule attests to the multifaceted interests of humanist scholars, artists, writers, and general readers who all share a single belief in the transformative power of literature. This year's homage is paid to Emeritus Professor of English, Eddie Bohr. Throughout his 35 years at the University of the West Indies, Bohr became known for his sharp intellect, his incisive scholarship, and his creative spirit. Bohr is widely revered as one of the most influential Caribbean literary critics and is an internationally acclaimed expert on Derek Walcott's work. Poetry, among all of the other literary genres, was probably his first love. In an interview with Caribbean Beat magazine in 2006, Bohr betrayed this sentiment, and I quote, "I always used to say, half in jest, but only half, that the thing I would most have liked to be in the world is a poet. So the fact that sometimes now people refer to me as a poet first is kind of a great thrill to me." End quote. This year's conference, Making Us Better Than We Think We Could, Alternative Identities and Technologies, is taken from one of Bohr's 3 collections of poetry. The conference theme honors Bohr's intimate connection with poetry and locates us in the present amidst rapid technological advancements. But such progress exists alongside crimes against humanity, economic strife, socio-political injustices, and critical environmental challenges. The Caribbean faces its own unique trials, but one of our greatest advantages resides in our cultural prosperity. Our Caribbean imagination, finding expression in our creative works, has revealed to us all what it means to live in a rich landscape of inclusive diversity. May we never take this for granted. I congratulate the conference host, the Department of Literary, Cultural, and Communication Studies, for providing a platform for a wide literary community to explore, connect, and celebrate our astounding literary inheritance. I wish you all a most successful conference. Thank you. I hope you're not tired of me yet, because I have a part 2. It's a double game. I always remember when I was on campus on the whole, Merle would say, "Morning, morning." It could be afternoon, it could be night, but she would say, "Morning, morning," and I loved it. Always with her basket, probably from Guadeloupe or something, right? Yeah, okay. Dr. MERLE HODGE, writer, activist, academic, educator, was born in Curette, Trinidad in 1944. She was one of 4 girls. She spent much of her time in between the homes of her parents and grandmother. With the aid of a government scholarship, she attended Bishop Anstey High School in Port of Spain, then went on to the University of London, where she read for French language, literature, and Latin. Hodge left Trinidad in 1962, the year of the island's independence. She did postgraduate work on writers from the Francophone-speaking Caribbean and Africa. She also worked in a children's home in Denmark. Her debut novel, Crick Crack Monkey, published in 1970, was written during her time in England, Denmark, and France. She spoke in an interview with Andre Bagu about the way in which this experience in the children's home shaped her view of her own childhood. Hodge said that when the children in the home were taken for walks, they could, and I quote, tell you the name of every tree, flower, or weed along the way. All of this was in sharp contrast to my childhood experience. These children had a strong sense of who they were and what that meant. Nobody was suggesting to them that they would be better people if they were somebody else, somebody from a different place. Quick Crack was to a large extent a looking back at my childhood from this vantage point. Her second novel, For the Life of Letitia, looks at a similar, if overarching, preoccupation in Hodge's writing, a desire to understand the nature of independence, what it meant to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, self-determining, self-defining, and ultimately free of history's haunting shadows. For the Life of Letitia, published in 1993, Hodge said she set out to look at the high school experience in the era of independence, almost 2 decades in, that had brought on an expansion of secondary education. In the novel, Letitia is a young activist standing up for what is right, fighting against classism and racism. Hodge's latest novel, One Day Congote, which won the 2022 Bocas Henry Swansea Award, is set in the period between 1900 and 1955. The protagonist, Gwyneth Cuffey, is also a teacher and advocate, advocating for children's rights, going against the current of colonial traditions, but never giving up in spite of the many hardships she faces. As a writer, Hodge's prose has clarity and precision. She has mastery over the many voices that people her novels and controls with elegance the cadence of her syntax. For all of this and more, she is a wonderful writer. But she has shone so brightly in so many other areas. Hodge has been a valuable resource in education and awareness programs for many NGOs, and has served in a number of public service bodies, among them the Advisory Council to the Academy at the University of Trinidad and Tobago for Arts, Letters, Culture, and Public Affairs, the Trinidad and Tobago National Commission for UNESCO, and the Board of Advocates for Safe Parenthood and Reproductive Rights, known as ASPIRE. Hodge also co-founded the advocacy organization Working Women for Social Progress, also known as Working Women, and I could go on and on. At the University of the West Indies, where she was a senior lecturer, she taught West Indian and African diaspora literature, creative writing, prose fiction. She coordinated, which was then the English Language Foundations program, and also published a seminal textbook and valuable resource, The Knots in English, a manual for Caribbean users. Hodge has also facilitated many creative writing workshops, and I can attest to the fact that she was a very generous writer and colleague. The best ones usually are. Always ready to share what she could or offer compliments for the things that she liked. Let me conclude by saying that it's been an honor to give this introduction. Merle Hodge is widely and deeply admired for her work in fiction and her work in real life. She has influenced and inspired so many in the many spheres she has occupied. To me, she has come to embody the idea of what it means to be truly independent, and I can only be grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean, for reminding us of Dr. Merle Hodge's extensive record of service. And if you find I hesitate a little bit when I say Dr. Merle Hodge, it's because she's our local celebrity. She really goes by her first name, Merle, right? Name was Merle, right? So in honor of her celebrity status, we have a little video tribute that we want. Fix your face, man. We have a little video tribute that we want to share with you, right? Stay tuned. Hodge in the early 70s when I joined the UWI faculty at Mona, where she lectured in French Caribbean and French African literature. In 1970, she published Crack Monkey to wide acclaim, taking her place among West Indian literary greats who helped shape our Caribbean identities through their art and critical insights. Her groundbreaking essay, The Shadow of the Whip, a comment on male-female relations of the Caribbean, published in Ord Cool's Is Massacre Dead, confirmed the emergence of another strong feminist voice in the region. MERLE published another blunt assessment of the status of women in Sataku 13, titled Young Women and the Development of Stable Family Life in the Caribbean. And in 1979, she was appointed Director for the Development of Curriculum for the Morris Bishop Government in Grenada. Her professional trajectory was clear and deeply appreciated by scholars who relied on her acuity and strong sense of purpose. In 1993, she published For the Life of Letitia, which deepened her exploration of the patriarchal constraints that mute women's voices and frustrate their development. The impact of her early work on my development never faded. Our paths crossed many times in the ensuing years in the common task of naming our place at home in the Caribbean and in the world. Later, MERLE published an important essay on the language of Earl Lovelace and Anthurium, yet another area of her research and writing. Writer, activist, teacher, scholar, pathfinder, and co-winner of the 2022 Books Henry Swansea Award for Distinguished Service to Caribbean Letters. What an influential and storied career MERLE has had. Well done, MERLE. May you continue your quest for years to come.
MERLE, HODGE. I don't know, I live here in St. Augustine, that part of St. Augustine that is still bush because I keep it as bush. Right? In literature, I was a reader as a child. So I ended up, you know, writing myself, and that impulse came out of the fact that there were no books. And all these other storybooks I ever read as a child had, you know, nothing at all. And I remember that the day I decided to say, I wrote stuff when I was little. And I decided, I said, there's not one of these storybooks that has children sweeping their grandmother yard with a bush broom. So I am going to do that. I can't remember the story, but I remember the illustration I drew, which is a bear, a teddy bear. You know, the children's books from abroad, they have animals, you know, doing things. So I drew a bear or teddy bear or something sweeping the yard, granny yard up in Mexico Road, you know. But okay, and that's it. I was a son and two grands. Right?
Well, I had met MERLE in the late 70s because I was actually moderating a foundation course or the foundation courses, and I met her at about that time. Then I didn't really get to know her very well until she was my graduate student. No, a little before that, because she took over the moderation of the university courses. And she was so meticulous in her teaching, her record keeping, and every aspect of these courses. And of course, MERLE brought a zeal to the moderation and governance of those courses. That, in a sense, it was part of her activism because it was something that was overlooked and discounted.
Okay, so I first met MERLE when I came back to Trinidad after having gone to school and worked in Toronto, in Canada. I came back home. I was awaiting actually my landed immigrant status. So in those days, you had to come back home to wait. And while I was waiting, I saw this ad in the paper asking for a conference mobilizer. Haha. Little did I know the trouble I was going to get myself in. And I say trouble in the sense that good trouble, yeah? So I applied for the job, and it was to mobilize around women and the economy. So I came, I interviewed, I got the job. And basically, over the year, from that point on, MERLE, Jackie, and a whole bunch of people from Working Women traversed the country, both Trinidad and Tobago, speaking to women about the impact of structural adjustment on their lives. And of course, that changed my life and changed my perspective and my decision to go back to Canada. So that's when I met Merle, in a nutshell, in 1992.
Well, I met Merle eons ago. I believe, I cannot remember her in high school, but we went to the same high school, and we always shared those memories and those stories about our education. We were into the post-independence period and the decolonization period, and we had so we've shared those experiences.
I first met Merle in the late 70s, but we got quite closer in the early 80s. Being a groupie, I saw her at Labor Day rally down in Faisabad. At the time, she was in Grenada. So I was so excited and introduced myself. So when she came back in the 80s now, she was invited to attend a group that I was part of to talk about her experience in Grenada. And I had to take her down, so I was more excited.
I'm Sheila Amsa, journalist. I've known her for, I would say, the better part of almost 40 years. So it feels like a very, very long time now. And she's a sister, she's a friend. We've worked together in the Women's Movement. We worked together at UWI. We've advocated together in vigils and fan discussions and protests and demonstrations and marches. It was somewhere, I think, in Westmore, and there was a book launch, there was a book shopping. And there was a book launch, and also a book related thing. And I was there, she was there, and apparently I walked over and spoke with her. And from what she recalls, I don't have an independent recollection of it. From what she recalls, they started the relationship that we've had for the next however many years and continuing,
I saw how the writers were taking issues that were pertinent to them and their lives and making stories of them. And I said to myself, we have all kinds of things going on where I come from that we could get it. Well, of course, there were books out already, but we weren't aware. There's Salvan and Naipaul and Sierra James and people like that have written novels already, but I came to the whole high school here without ever seeing any one of those, it's like, right? The teachers and bishops tended to be people brought from England, right? In some cases to their ruin. There was one that we almost chased back home, a young woman, and they didn't prepare her for sale for the motives. And we had a good ringleader in our class, a ringleader of pranks, but the teachers who irritated us the most.
When you were in high school, you were being brought up to be good colonials. You were receiving a colonial education. When I went to school, which was a bit later than when we went to school, they still, in the first year, they would bring in English teachers. English teachers were from England. So they taught us how to, they were teaching us how to speak and how to conduct ourselves as young colonials. Merle looked at that very carefully, and she set out in her writing to deconstruct that hegemony, to deconstruct the notion that only things that came out of the colonial experience were of value. And all of her fiction does it very lightly, but with deadly serious intent.
Merle's writing is in the lingo of the ordinary person. The person you meet on the street, the person in the neighborhood, so that's what I gathered from the snippets that I can remember and picked up.
It was very significant for MERLE, in terms of the work that MERLE did, to affirm that the ordinary people had voices, they had perspectives, they had a sensibility, they had a culture, it was coherent, and it was a viable culture. It was not a culture that needed to be erased for the people to become truly human or truly civilized. So her fiction was about changing lives. I believe in one of her interviews, she said she was tired of us looking from outside of the window at other people's stories and other people's lives. So she wanted to inscribe the life of the common people into the stories, into our stories, into our narratives, and so change the way that we see ourselves. And she was extremely successful in doing that, and very systematic, very carefully crafted her work.
The first thing that I wrote for publication was Crack Monkey. I wrote it when I was a university student, when I was in Europe. Write piece in England, piece in Denmark, piece in France, and I just walked around with it. Okay, so, also the fact that I studied the literature as part of the degree, I did French and read a lot of French literature. I think, I think that played a large part as well,
I think of our fiction as particularly geared for girls, well, a young adult fiction, particularly crafted for girls who would have been enduring the onslaught of that denigration and that erasure of their village backgrounds, of the sinful past. And they would have been being taught, because I think in a sense you were taught to despise that village upbringing, that simple identity, to despise the ancestral, the maternal figures that were black and very often poor, very often struggling against tremendous odds. So girls in the schools even were being taught to look at that with malcontent.
When I left country, as it were, came down, I often say that I did not even know the concept of wolves, to even know that there were wolves to avoid in a big place. And very early in my time, I fell in with Hazel Brown, Asha Campbell, and through them met MERLE in the women's movement. And now that I look back as an adult, and I understand what wolves are, and I understand the fate I avoided, I am so thankful that it is in that embrace that I felt, and that stayed with me and swallowed me and kept me for all the time. Just entering a big city and all the things and all the traps that one has to avoid in a big city. So MERLE, I think, features very much as part of that very, very early life that I've had in Wolfsburg.
Now, of course, MERLE, being as exacting as she is about correctness of things, she was interesting to work with because she was concerned about getting it exactly right.
I think writing for change is one of the things that we have done in the Caribbean for a long time, right? The point is to change the world, and you have to use the tools that you have, right? One of the beautiful things about MERLE is that she doesn't only write for change, right? She acts for change, she works for change. I think the combination of those two is what makes her special. But writing for change is important because it is about discourses. And the things that we care about in the Caribbean, we have to write about those things so they are part of global discourses. So even as I think it's not the only thing that causes change, I think it's an important tool or component or element in having us see ourselves differently, and also how other people see us, and the discourses around what it means to be Caribbean in the world. So writing for change is an important aspect of that, and literature, of course, plays a very important part in all of that.
I mean, she has been a prolific and consistent writer to the editor. So a lot of the issues that working women dealt with. She was the main writer. We would all sit together, throw out ideas, but she would put it together, let us to the editor, go to work with. So that skill and that gift she has came in very handy for our organization, and I think for her life, well, it's her livelihood part of.
Merle was really and truly, even at her most, particularly at her most activist moment, she was a critical activist. She could think about the particular aspects of activism and critique them in herself as well. And I remember you talking about South Africa, Mandela, Winnie Mandela. There was a lot of talk in support of Winnie Mandela. And Merle said, but look at some of the things she has done. You have to draw a line and so on. And I found that her, as I say, her scrupulous honesty in her criticism, in her teaching, and also in her activism, she was able to maintain a balance that I continue to admire.
So she wrote fiction with an activist intent, but then we'll back that up with feet on the ground. And she has done a tremendous amount of work through working women, and a tremendous amount of work on the ground. Again, working with people that would not necessarily have had the opportunities that she would have had. And so she carried that activism into the streets.
In the formation of the group, a lot of the foundation ideas were hers. So projects we would have worked on, like anti-corporal punishment, no guns for toys, the school for alternative development.
When there was a conference, I think it was going to be at Goldsmiths in London, and everybody was talking about whether they were going to this conference and how people, not me, I was very junior in this thing, and how they were going to get funding to go and this kind of thing. And everybody said, well, Merle, aren't you going? And Merle is sort of sulking about this thing. And they said, well, what is wrong with it? She said, what is the name of the conference? So they said, well, it's Shaking Her Breasts at History. And Merle said, I must go to a conference and go on one of them and ask them for money to go to a conference about shaking the breasts of history. She said, you're mad. She said, and besides, she then went into a treatise, because this activism in Merle went very deep, on how this in itself was extremely belittling and stereotyping of women, because you are not supposed to be able to say things of history unless you have breasts to shake.
Merle served others, and therefore there's a contentment about her life that came out of that other-mindedness. So I think the greatest lesson that her legacy can be for this generation is that generosity and that other-mindedness, and that willingness to put yourself at the service of others, and the big heart, the generosity, the love, the big heart. I think that this is something that we can all benefit from.
Yeah, I think Merle is one of those rare individuals that the Caribbean produced a fair amount of those what we call organic intellectuals.
One of the things I would say when I think of Merle that I found absolutely characterized her, what could be, it could be a little frustrating, it could be very entertaining, but it was all inspiring, is that her scrupulous and unyielding honesty about expressing what she actually thought.
Merle is a very caring person. She has, sometimes when we're doing our work, she would say, I'm not a social worker, but the things she does, very akin to social work. She cares for children, she cares for animals, she would support people in need, she would support even her family. She would take in family. She would take in people to live by her. So sometimes I think the shell that she puts out, or people see, is not really the underlying mood. Will is a very caring person, a very loving person. And if you want to be in a good line, you could check her. You know, one of the most important things is to do a lot of reading and a wide range of reading, because that way you wouldn't end up just imitating one particular writer if you love that writer and you're reading everything. And just keep writing. Even when I see people who are in the creative writing class and some in the MFA and thing, first thing I ask them is, are you still writing? I think we have a lot to be proud of.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was just a little taste of our honoree this evening, Dr. MERLE HODGE. I noticed how many times they talked about MERLE's activism and how much she cares about people and animals. I can personally tell you all of that is true. As part of the video production, we visited MERLE at home, and we saw a cat. We said, so MERLE, how many cats do you have? She said, I don't have many these days, I only have about 7. So now we want to call Professor back on the stage again, please. To make a special presentation to our honoree. It's not very often you see MERLE at a loss for words. Okay, moving along, we'd like to invite the choir to do 2 musical numbers for us. This is the UE Arts Chorale with the music director, Mr. Jesselyn Murray, and they are celebrating 25 years of performances at the UE. And this afternoon, they will be performing Sit and Dream, a composition by Afro-American composer Rosemond Powell with text by Langston Hughes, and then the ever-popular calypso anthem, Calypso Music, right? The chorale will be conducted by Assistant Conductor Mark Anthony Peter, and Mr. Murray will accompany the chorale on the keyboard. Enjoy.
To sit and dream, to sit and read, to sit and learn about the world. To sit and dream, to sit and read. To sit and learn about the world. To sit and dream, to sit and read, to sit and learn about the world. Outside our world of here and now, outside our world, our problem outside our world of here and now, outside our world of here and now, outside our world, our problem world. Our problem to dream of those horizons of the soul, of dreams made whole, unfettered free. Help me, help me. Oh, you are dreamers too, you are dreamers. Help me make our world anew. I reach out my hand to you. 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 I reach out my hand. I reach out my out my hand. To sit and dream, to sit and breathe, to sit and learn about the world. To sit and dream, to sit and read, to sit and learn about the world. To sit and learn about the world. To sit and dream. Wash away the water around me. And tomorrow I'm ready for a brand new discovery. Sing with me, Calypso, Calypso, Calypso music. Yeah, yeah. Calypso, 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 Calypso music. Calypso music. Sing, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, Calypso. Sing, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, Calypso. I say that I am the singer of the growing time now. Sing, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, Calypso. Sweet, sweet, sweet music. Oh, how I love it. It is a living vibration. Yes, it's alive. Taking within my Caribbean Alright, to make a politician cringe. But a lower man's party to cherish. It is a sweet music. I never lose it. It's like a shake like a shampoo now. So it is a feeling that you know. That's Calypso. 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 Yeah, yeah. Calypso. Calypso. Calypso music. Calypso music. Sing, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, Calypso. Sing, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, Calypso. I say that I am the singer of the growing time now. Sing, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, Calypso. Sweet, sweet, sweet music.
Okay, people, it's confirmed now. Even though I came all in black, I will never be able to join the choir. Wasn't that some marvelous singing? Okay. Now, moving right along, we want to do the introduction of our featured speaker. And to do that, we will call up Dr. Geraldine Skeet to do the honors.
Dean, Head of Department, Honoree, conference participants, UE colleagues, special guests, and our keynote speaker, good evening. Professor King's monograph, Island Bodies, Transgressive Sexualities in the Caribbean Imagination, was recognized as best book by the Caribbean Studies Association. In addition to her academic work, she is the author of several poetry collections, including All the Rage and the Lambert award-winning Rock, Salt, Stone. Her essays have appeared in a wide range of publications, including LitHub, the MS Blog, Sargasso, The Progressive, and the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies. Professor King is currently working on a critical biomythography exploring how Black women's protest and performance shaped 19th century Trinidadian law, culture, and society. She is also creating an online resource to archive digital literature by people of African descent. In addition to her creative and scholarly contributions, Professor King serves as a Carol L. Zicklin Honors Academy Chair at Brooklyn College, City University of New York. We're really pleased to have Professor King here with us in Trinidad. She has some Trinidad connections. Her mother was born and raised in Princeton, so she's my fellow Southerner. She presented at the West Indian Literature Conference in 2017 here at St. Augustine, and also in Jamaica and Miami. She's published in the Journal of West Indian Literature and presented at other conferences in Trinidad, including the Caribbean Studies Association and the World Conference on Carnival. As a visiting professor at UAE's Institute for Gender and Development Studies, the IGDS, she taught a short course on Caribbean sexualities in 2013. And she also led a lunchtime seminar there and was a guest lecturer in classes at the IGDS. She has participated in the Focus Lit Fest multiple times, reading her poetry, participating in panels, and teaching a workshop. And she was also an artist in residence at Alice Yard in 2016. And she's also read at Paper-Based Books Monthly tea session. So again, her current research project is she's conducting an ongoing research in Trinidad's archives, right? And other research elsewhere throughout the island. And she also has family, friends, colleagues, and collaborators here in Trinidad. So we warmly welcome you, and we're glad that you're here with us again, and we welcome you to deliver your feature address.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and good evening, everyone. I also want to, of course, thank the entire West Indian Literature Association for this invitation. It's really humbling to be giving the opening keynote address at a conference that I began coming to as a graduate student and that I've been to so many times. And I believe in the original version of the program, I was going before MERLE HODGE. So the difficult task of following such a luminary, but I will do my best. It's always a pleasure to be here at the UWI, which I consider my intellectual home in the region, and special big up to my colleagues from the Institute of Gender and Development Studies, with whom I've done a lot of co-teaching, co-writing, etc. You know that it's going to be a good conference when there are so many great titles of papers and sessions happening at the same time that you struggle which one to go to. So, thank you and congratulations to the coordinators and the organizers and all of the UWI staff who have put together the program and logistics. And my apologies to my colleagues, many of whom I won't be able to see because I'm running to see somebody else and will grab you afterwards and try to ask you where to talk over lunch. I think that tonight, I consider myself to be giving less a speech than a verbal essay, in the French ESSAI, an attempt at an argument. In other words, I'm trying to think. And in a bit, I'm going to ask you to contribute to our collective knowledge and to reflect on my topic. It has been customary to make a statement at the start of any public gathering or address that acknowledges the first known caretakers of the land that we are on. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, those people are the Kalinago, sometimes called the Caribs, and the Taino. While I do want to note that I, and I'm sure all of us, wish for the safety of all of those in the path of Hurricane Milton, in lieu of a land acknowledgement, I generally try to integrate something about the location and its history into my remarks or my reading. And today that's an easy segue, because in order to talk about why Caribbean literary studies still matters, I must begin by talking about why the Caribbean still matters. The Caribbean is the beginning of the global capitalist project from way back in the 15th century. Perhaps not coincidentally, it is also the site of one of the few ongoing experiments in communism. Yet for the most part, the Caribbean no longer merits enough attention to be actively bombarded with weapons outside of cultural imperialism and economic policies. These less immediately deadly tactics are still, of course, extremely detrimental to Caribbean people, lands, cultures, and economies. So despite what seems to be a profound and persistent absence of the Caribbean in most news stories outside of the region, be assured that the powers in the global north still have some portion of their attention on the Caribbean. Here at the West Indian Literature Conference, I expect I do not have to justify why, faced with the constant televised updates of the mass murder and land grab taking place in Palestine and now Lebanon, we must also talk about the mass murder taking place in Haiti. Unfortunately, genocide is not new on this planet, and certainly genocide is not new to the Caribbean. The Caribbean came into being as a concept and region through colonial empire building predicated on the mass murder of indigenous peoples and the attempt to erase their cultures. So the Caribbean has much to teach us relative to, for instance, the wars in the Middle East and Ukraine. And as some of our younger scholars born at the turn of this century are studying for their doctorates, they have already received the experiential education of what I like to call the latest global pandemic of COVID-19. Because AIDS has never left the Caribbean or people of color in the global north, despite others' attempts to erase or forget it. It's possible that I'm just getting old, but epidemics, war, economic fluctuations, state violence, and rapid technological evolutions all seem too familiar for comfort, especially for those who live in, study in, come from, or have ancestry in the Caribbean. Furthermore, right now, I don't know if you're aware of this, wealthy countries are scrambling to colonize the moon and to divide up its natural resources before we even know what those resources are. It's too reminiscent of the scramble for Africa and the rest of the global south. At the same time, the Caribbean, alongside Pacific Islands, is experiencing the impact of evolving and impending climate catastrophe that foreshadows what is coming for the continents. the way that Hurricane Maria foreshadowed Hurricane Helene, foreshadowed Milton. So yes, the Caribbean still matters. So now that we've emphatically established that, let's move on to why literary study and Caribbean literary study also still matter. And although we've heard a good deal about her, I do also want to say just a few words about MERLE HODGE's work. Crick Crack Monkey was the first Caribbean novel I read as a college student. My professor for that class was Dr. Helen Pine Timothy, may she rest in power, who co-founded the Association of Caribbean Women Writers and Scholars. Crick Crack was a revelation to me. Its language, its shape, the female protagonist and her journey, and Professor Pine Timothy's instruction helped me to understand it on a deeper level, as well as its significance both on its own and in the context of its time, including the fact that it was, of course, both by and about a Black Caribbean girl. That experience is one of the strong roots of my being convinced that Caribbean literature and its analysis are important. So thank you, MERLE HODGE. I'm so glad that we are honoring you this evening. For many years, this will not be strange to you, literature professors have been bombarded and beleaguered by doomsday proclamations about the crisis in the humanities. Even as an engineering teacher created the concept of STEAM, standing for science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, that did not halt the general preoccupation with STEM-only fields. And to be clear, I'm not making light of this. Comparative literature and classics departments, among others, have closed or been consolidated at many higher education institutions, which has led to the loss of jobs as well as the diminishing of students' education. I am not going to cite the statistics that I almost learned by heart when I was dean of my college's School of the Humanities and Social Sciences, but those numbers show that in the USA, yes, initially, science majors make more money than humanities majors in the first year after graduation, but 5 to 10 years after graduation, humanities majors, for the most part, catch up to or surpass STEM alumni salaries. I also will not detail the list I eagerly share with my students of the ways that literary analysis is applicable to non-literary fields, although I will share one of my favorite ones that gets their eyes popping. It's the ability to deconstruct a job listing and craft a letter and a resume that respond to its keywords and concepts, very similar to writing an essay. But here today, for our purposes, my main argument is that literary studies still matters because our primary methodology is one of the most useful and most broadly applicable of any field. I am biased, but you are too. Physicists are invaluable to humankind, but I do not think they would get very far using the laws of physics to analyze most forms of art, literature, or even culture. And if they were to use physics principles as metaphors, well, then they would be translating them using a tool of literary analysis. Similarly, economists who are useful to humankind can study the use of money and property in literature and culture with, I expect, interesting but limited results without actual literary tools. So what is this methodology mightier than engineering or math? It is close reading, still the primary methodology taught and used by literary scholars. And I chose the title, Technically Speaking, in part because I want to claim close reading and our other methods and strategies with the language we use to valorize the sciences and scientific technology. Literary scholars can use close reading to analyze anything written or said about the nature of the world. Because language is used to communicate about chemistry, physics, photography, just about everything, the ability to analyze language is itself endlessly useful. and can be very powerful when combined with the content knowledge of other fields. So for instance, I tell my students that I hope they use close reading when assessing the truth and value of social media posts, and when deciding whom to vote for. I could go on and on about the benefits and utility of this methodology, but I actually did not put close reading into the title of this talk. Why else does literary study more broadly matter, particularly while literature itself continues to evolve? We now have, as was mentioned in the plenary this morning, AI-generated text, digital everything, speculative everything, hybrid everything, from collage text, which we used to call bricolage, to the poemella, you heard of that one, it's the novella that is also a poem, to the performance memoir. If you haven't read a performance memoir, I highly recommend those by Haitian-American Gabrielle Seville. In fact, online novels, speculative poetics and fiction, virtual reality, and digital storytelling are all topics of presentations at this year's conference. And I know at least one of those topics is being presented by a graduate student, by Amanda Zilla. I'd like to ask all of the graduate students present to stand up, please. That thesis, that dissertation, you're not sure what you're going to be doing afterwards. So please look out for them. If you have tips, if you know about postdocs, let them know. Let them know that they can have a career in this field. So thank you. So the presence of all of these exciting topics is not surprising, since the subtitle of our gathering is Alternative Identities and Technologies. The formats, structures, and styles of literature are always changing because writers are compelled to create and readers are excited to experience their work. And just as literature continues to evolve, literary study continues to evolve as well. Literary scholars now often include the use of literary data, collaborative analysis, and literary expansive research that connects literature to archives, music, folklore, social media, and any number of other elements of both so-called high art and popular culture. For instance, we can consider Professors Alex Gill and Kaima Glover's Archipelagos, an open access, peer-reviewed digital journal of Caribbean digital scholarship that includes some great literary analysis. We can also consider the dragademic performances of Lola von Miramar, also known as the brilliant Puerto Rican scholar Larry LaFontaine Stokes, a full professor at the Department of American Culture at the University of Michigan. And we're going to see throughout this conference, again, other exciting scholarship that pushes the boundaries of what we think Caribbean literary studies can be. If you would allow me to put myself in this literary expansive category as well, I'm in the process of writing what I'm calling a critical biomythography. And I have a bit of a confession to make in relationship to stating that Caribbean literary study still matters. Perhaps I doth insist too much. I was trained in comparative literature, not the European-focused Cold War kind, and literary analysis is the core of my training and the grounding of everything that I do. However, my scholarly book, Island Bodies, Transgressive Sexualities in the Caribbean Imagination, also includes analysis of documentary and feature films, music lyrics, activist and legal texts, and visual art, in addition to stories, poems, and novels. I am proud of that book, and actually I'm proud to announce here for the first time that the University of Florida is going to release a revised anniversary edition, hopefully in 2026, and it will include the work of other scholars that will preface with updates of some of the content. So look out for the call for submissions for that. But back to my insisting too much. My current book-length project isn't solely or even predominantly focused on literature either. I'm examining Black women's post-emancipation protests in 19th century Port of Spain. along with analysis of literary portrayals of these protests by writers such as Nervesi Phillip, Monique Rafi, Richard Schrader, and others. I call this book a critical biomythography, echoing, of course, Audre Lorde, because this collective biography of Janet woman will include original poetry by myself, as well as traditional critical scholarship. And I trust you will consider my dalliances with extra literary texts to be innovative and not disloyal to literary studies. And I am in fact confident that as a body you will support me, in part because of the breadth of scholarship at this year's gathering demonstrates an enthusiasm for diverse approaches to literary analysis, and in part because I have already had some personal experience with the openness of the West Indian Literature Conference. The 2016 conference in Jamaica was, I believe, one of the first, if not the first, venue where I presented my critical biomythography in progress, using the methodology that I now call radical interdisciplinarity. I define radical interdisciplinarity as the combining of traditional scholarship with that of the creative arts, in my case, poetry. My hybrid work is inspired by a lot of people, including, I'll mention some Caribbean luminaries who are no longer with us, who worked in multiple genres. So the aforementioned Audre Lorde's speeches and poetry, Kamal Brathwaite's and Edward Glissant's poetry and essays, and Colin Robinson's poetry and activism. We Caribbean literary scholars are capable of using our skills in more than one arena. And if we can do so well, both Caribbean literature and the study of it can enrich us and benefit anyone who interacts with our work, making us, in the words of Edward Bow in our convening document, even better than we thought we could be. At that West Indian Literature Conference in Jamaica, as now, I was trying to ting. And no one in the room treated my presentation as though it was different in form, substance, or quality from anyone else on the panel. This acceptance of my experiment allayed some of my fears of trying something drastically different from traditional scholarship. So when I encountered resistance, and I did encounter resistance, when presenting my hybrid project in front of US American colleagues, I wasn't so much concerned. My Caribbean and Caribbean Studies colleagues, the ones most familiar with the context for this work, understood it. That the West Indian Literature Conference has honored me by inviting me to give a keynote address despite, or maybe even because, of my history of conducting literary expansive research, demonstrates a level of open-mindedness that is just one reason I continue to appreciate the international community of Caribbean scholars. So now I want each of you to think of a book or an essay or a critical strategy that is exciting to you right now, either related to Caribbean literary study, the critical scholarship, or a work of Caribbean literature itself, again, thinking expansively the way that the conference encourages us to. So I want you to turn to a neighbor and tell them about this exciting work. We're sharing our knowledge.
Which aspect?
Make sure that the other person also gets a chance to share. Feel free to take notes on your phone of whatever you need to look up afterwards to read. Thank you for participating. To me, this is one of the best parts of conferences, right? Is getting to talk to other people, hear about what they've read that you haven't had time to read yet, or didn't even know was published. So I hope that you are learning about texts and critical strategies and scholars that you weren't familiar with before. And I hope that you started a conversation and you will continue over our cocktail reception and the rest of the conference. So I also hope that you're, getting to make my argument for me. But I will earn my supper. So why does Caribbean literary studies still matter? Returning to my title, technically speaking, it's a phrase that is usually used to emphasize that the speaker is being precise and not only to indicate that they are talking about technology. So let me be specific and share a couple of examples from my own experiences. My close readings and analysis of 19th century cross-dressed carnival performances, which were inspired and informed by my study of trans characters in novels by Shani Mutu and Mayra Santos Febres, were cited in the legal arguments that led to the Caribbean Court of Justice striking down a law against transvestism in Guyana. That is not what I thought was going to happen when I sat in my apartment trying to tease out my scholarly arguments. And when I first heard about it, I thought it was a hoax. I thought it was spam. What? But it continues to be one of the highlights of my academic career. My second example is from the classroom. When I teach Nurbesi Phillips' poems, and hopefully everyone here has heard of Nurbesi Phillips, is familiar with her work, some students are completely confused. And sometimes they don't even read the poems because they're so put off by the formatting. Meanwhile, other students are enthralled by the work and excited to say that they felt that they understood it immediately because it reflects their experience of colonialism or immigration. By the end of the class, I, along with the students who intuitively understood the poems, have helped the others understand better the works of art and the violence of colonialism, the fact of hybrid, or what we used to call creolized experiences, and the perseverance of colonized and formerly colonized peoples. We get to those learning experiences, those inspirational moments, through literary analysis. And one more brief example, pedagogical example, of how I know Caribbean literary studies still matters. A few years ago, a student in one of my classes came up to me after I'd taught Audre Lorde and the Cuban writer Akio Bejas. In every class, this was one of those students who had her head down and just was writing tons and tons and tons and tons of notes. And she came up to me and she said, "Professor, you have given me the language to explain my life." There's nothing better than that, right? And I know many of you know this because you have had similar experiences. Art speaks truth to power, and literary analysis helps illuminate the artist's intended and unconscious messages. Through our writing and teaching, Caribbean literary scholars elucidate the relationships between texts and put them into context. We guide readers to do the same. Poems and essays do not end wars or climate change, but they do sometimes change people, which is more than we can say for a lot that circulates in our world. So I talked about inspirational moments, and I want you to think about your own, some people call them aha moments, I call them oh moments. So I want you to think about your literary oh moment, right? Something that was the instant that you realized that you wanted to be a part of this profession and you wanted to continue to read literature. This time I'm not going to ask you to share it, but consider this your icebreaker for the rest of the conference. So as you meet people or run into people you already know, you can ask them about their oh moment, their literary or critical spark, the text or experience that inspired or confirmed their commitment to our simultaneously revered and reviled profession. I have mentioned close reading as our shared primary methodology. And this flexible tool can be used in conjunction with many theoretical approaches. We can focus our close readings through critical race theory, or decolonial, feminist, affective, queer, postmodern, disability, or any number of other theories, or through critical strategies such as eco-criticism or deconstruction. Now, some of you may be inwardly rolling, well, we're Caribbean, we don't inwardly roll our eyes, we outwardly. So you may be rolling your eyes at some of these strategies, thinking that certain ones are either too old or too new to be useful. And certainly a number of people, both colleagues outside of the humanities usually, and certainly people outside of academia, roll their eyes while they want to also roll back the funding of the humanities. Prominent in the headlines, of course, is the panic creeping across the world about gender theory and the upset in the USA over critical race theory. I'm using air quotes here because most of the people using these terms don't actually know what they mean. I believe that the fear and disdain some people have to specific approaches to understanding literature and culture, and the excitement and fulfillment others feel who have used these approaches are two sides of the same coin. Sometimes you can tell what matters by who is afraid of it and why. Those who are opposed to using theory to analyze the world through the lens of race. Those who are opposed to using theory to analyze the world through gender are afraid that we, and I'm claiming all of you right now is agreeing with me, they're afraid that we are going to change life as they know it and life as they want it to be. And you know what? They're right. We, and again, I'm presuming that the present company is included, want a world where a boy doesn't get bullied for not being masculine enough. We want a world where we can speak honestly about the racist horrors committed throughout history and today so that we can understand the truth of our past and present and avoid repeating it by dismantling structural and systemic oppression. We want a world that does not legislate the love of consenting adults. We want a world we have a chance to survive in because we're addressing the human causes of climate change, don't we? Yeah. Brilliant, traditional, and innovative, paper and digital, Caribbean novels, plays, and poems will continue to be written in all kind and manner of manifestations. And we, literary scholars, and our intellectual compatriots and descendants will continue to analyze them, hopefully brilliantly most of the time. And as the world and our cultures continue to evolve in gorgeous and terrifying ways, we, scholars of literature, will continue to be here. And we and our work will continue to matter, providing context, analysis, and reflection to help human beings understand ourselves. Colleagues, students, distinguished guests, I am here to tell you that the cliche is true. The pen is mightier than the sword, and Caribbean literary study still matters. Thank you for listening.
Can I say anything other than wow? That was an excellent presentation. Excellent. The way Professor King in her discourse was able to tie together all of the reasons why we're here today. We're here today, tonight, because of a love for literature, a love for the word, a love for writing. But it also brings to mind the importance of doing what you love and finding ways to make what you love an instrument through which you touch your world. Thank you very much. Okay, and to evening, we are going to have an item of music by Mr. Kaelan Alexis to give us some, music while we reflect on the things that we have learned tonight. Well, it's official. I am moving to creative arts. Professor King spoke about the importance of honoring our postgrad students and looking out for them and creating opportunities for them. So for our vote of thanks, I'm going to invite one of our postgrad students to come up here and share some closing thoughts with us.
All protocols, all protocols observed. I have been given a task that I have to say has been an amazing recollection on all that the humanities has had to offer. And so I begin. Melody Beatty once said, "Gratitude makes sense of our past, it brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow." Tonight, it is an absolute honor and a privilege to offer the vote of thanks on this occasion. And on behalf of the organizing committee of the 2024 West Indian Literature Conference, I would like to thank all of our contributors who gave of their expertise and their experience at today's panels at the beginning of the conference. Our profuse thanks are extended to Professor Rosamond S. King as the keynote speaker for tonight's ceremony, and whose words will continue to resonate with us as the conference progresses. And I'd really like to take this opportunity to thank you for reminding us that the Caribbean matters, that the discourse on the Caribbean matters, always and in all ways, technically speaking. We extend our gratitude for the iconic presence of Dr. MERLE HODGE, whose lifetime contribution to the development and promotion of the work of the Department of the Literary, Cultural, and Communication Studies continues to be a source of inspiration. Words are never enough to thank these wonderful humans, these powerful women, for their constant support for the humanities. Our deepest regards and hearty thanks are conveyed to the Dean's Office of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, the administrative and technical staff, Department of Literary, Cultural, and Communication Studies, our sponsors, Caribbean Airlines, we thank you, UE Press, we thank you, and all our stakeholders for your help and support at various stages of the event. To Ms. Georgia Alexander, coordinator of the Artisan Market, and Ms. Melvina Hazard, coordinator of the Bocas Lit Fest Children's Literature event, a special thank you for adding your unique touches to the conference and for making the event a wonderful convergence of words, art, and creativity. To Ms. Diane Duki Alexander and Mr. Mervyn Alexander, we thank you for the design and creation of Dr. Hodge's gift. Thank you, Dr. Geraldine Skeet. Thank you, Dr. Karen Sanderson-Cole. Thank you, Dr. Michigan Adams and Ms. Amanda Silva for their unwavering service as they made this conference a reality. It is their energy that truly drives the success of the conference this year, as you will see. To Mr. Brennan King, whose enthusiasm and willingness to be part of this venture must not be unnoticed. Sir, I thank you. Of course, thank you to Mr. Jessel Murray and the UE Arts Chorale, as well as Mr. Kaelan Alexis for their enthralling musical performance. Our thanks are also conveyed to Lunessa Parks, lecturer at UWE's film program, who produced the video dedicated to our wonderful Dr. MERLE HODGE. At the end, this conference marks the dedication of the many who guide the future of Caribbean discourse at variegated levels. The organizing committee for the West Indian Literature Conference 2024 is very much thankful to all current and former faculty members and non-teaching staff members who continue to work tirelessly toward the success of this event. Indeed,
thank you is such a prayer that cannot be seen or touched. It must be felt by the heart. As such, our final thanks goes out to the audience tonight, to all of you for making this event the success we know it will be. Enjoy the conference. Enjoy the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. Thank you. At this point, I would like to invite Dr. Geraldine Skeet and Dr. Karen Sanderson-Cole to the stage, please. Yes? Dr. Burke, I invite you as well. To these wonderful ladies, these ladies who are the powerhouses behind the West Indian Literary Conference tonight, we offer you a simple token of thanks. Dr. Burke.
Just wanted to thank really personally Geraldine and Karen for all the work, the long nights, and the dedication to seeing this and bringing this to fruition. Of course, we all know something like this takes a lot of planning, a lot of guts, a lot of stick-to-itiveness, all of which they personified to the 10th power. So thanks a lot, and thanks a lot, Colin, for handing over so that continuity is there. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the 4 days. Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, y'all caught me there. All right, and to bring this evening to a close, we have one more thing that we want to invite all of you to, and that is our cocktail reception, which is next door at the Faculty of Social Sciences Lounge. Join us for a few minutes. You're not gonna like late. A few minutes. Let's talk, drink, eat a little something, and officially open our conference.